Good to be with you. Thank you all for coming out, joining us, welcoming us, choosing to meet the moment in this way. These are some tough times for all of us here, for some more than others. A real darkness has descended on this state. For some of you, literally last February, in the energy capital of the world, the man in the highest position of power could not keep the power flowing to the people that he was supposed to serve. Electricity, heat, running water, all failed because we were failed by the governor of the state of Texas. While people were literally dying in this state by the hundreds, others going without the very basic necessities that you expect as a human being, much less as American, as a citizen of this great state of Texas. Our governor was ordering that electricity be sold at its highest maximum allowable rate. Gas soon began to trade at 200 times the level that it had been before the lights went out in Texas. Some utilities took on billions of dollars in debt. Others literally had to declare bankruptcy. And all the while, the governor's biggest campaign contributors were making billions of dollars off of the suffering of our fellow Texans. Literally $11 billion in immoral, and I would argue illegal profits were made over 5 days last February by energy pipeline companies and energy traders across the state of Texas. Some have called this, and I think they're right, the largest transfer of wealth in Texas history. To add insult to injury, the inconvenience, the deaths, people freezing in their own homes in the energy capital of the world. The grid is still not fixed. You and I have been left holding the bag. $45 more per month on our utility bills now going forward. You add that to the $20 billion more that we're paying in property taxes since Greg Abbott took office. His stunt on the U.S.-Mexico border that stopped all trade between our two countries and sent prices at our grocery stores through the roof. He's the largest driver of inflation in this state. And as we endure and suffer the indignities of being attacked by our own governor, attacks on the right to vote, attacks on women being able to make their own decisions about their own body, attacks on members of the LGBTQ community in the state of Texas, attacks on teachers, librarians, counselors, those in public education who make the education of our kids possible. I just want you to know that I understand that it is tough right now in the state of Texas. But I think we all understand that we are tougher than this moment. In fact, we are more than a match for it. The fact that you are here more than 50 days before this contest is decided on the 8th of November, that you have not succumbed to the temptation to despair or to give up or to submit to this, that you understand that we are so much better and bigger than our current circumstances right now, certainly than the governor of the state of Texas. That fills me with hope. It gives me optimism at a time that I think we all need it and we all deserve it, because it is not just the fact that we're here or that we're planning to vote in this next election. Those two things are incredibly important. But that we're turning our faith in the future into action right now at this moment. Those of you who have signed up to knock on doors, to meet voters where they are, I guarantee you, you're going to win this election for Texas. There are those in this crowd who are wearing these yellow reflective vests. Each of them has a clipboard. On that clipboard are shifts for canvassing, for block walking, for knocking on the doors of our neighbors, and in some cases, complete strangers. The very people who are waiting for you to show up. When asked why more than 7 million of our fellow Texans did not cast a ballot in 2020, though they were eligible to do so. 7 million of our fellow Texans in 2020. 86,000 of them lived in this county. When asked why they did not, number one reason given was that no one ever asked them to. These are the very people targeted for suppression and intimidation by this governor, who signed the most restrictive voting law in America into law last year, making this the toughest state, bar none, in which to register or in which to cast a ballot. Wouldn't it be something if the fact that we came together here today, that you signed up with one of these volunteers wearing the yellow vest, that you went out there, knocked on the doors, had these important conversations, described in your own words, from your own heart, what's on the line in this election, and made those who've been drawn out of this democracy the margin of victory when we win this on the night of November 8th. Are you all with me on this? Because that's what it's going to take. All of us doing all we can with what we have, where we are. That describes the people of Texas. And that describes us as Democrats. That describes us as Republicans. That describes us as independents as well. Whatever the differences between us, there's far more that we have in common. After a governor who had sought to divide us based on every difference between us, who seeks to scare us about one another and make us even hate each other, saying, listen, I don't want to answer that question about the grid. Look out for that transgender child over there. Or if I'm asked to describe why so many teachers are fleeing the profession, the governor might say, I'm going to try to distract you with this idea called critical race theory, make us afraid of our own history and the stories of our fellow Texans. And you ask them about the sad and sorry state of Child Protective Services. 32,000 kids in the worst run foster care program in America, bar none, where 100 of them have lost their lives just since 2020. Hundreds more have been trafficked, have been violated, have been abused in the custody and care of the state of Texas. He'll direct your attention to the border with Mexico. Try to make you afraid of immigrants. Demonize and vilify them. Incite the kind of hatred and violence that was visited upon our community in El Paso, Texas on the 3rd of August, 2019, after this governor described the invasion that was coming here, said that we must repel it. We must, in his own words, take matters into our own hands and defend ourselves. There was somebody listening in Allen, Texas, who purchased an AK-47, drove that weapon of war 650 miles to my hometown, walked into a Walmart the Saturday before the school year started, full of kids with their parents and their grandparents buying backpacks and notebooks and school supplies. In walks this gunman, fueled with this hatred and fear, driven by this very governor, and opens fire and takes the lives of 23 people in one of the most peaceful communities in the United States of America that doesn't lose 20 people a year on most years. And he told police, I came to kill Mexicans. He told the rest of the world in a manifesto that he posted beforehand, I am here to repel the invasion that I've been warned about. We don't need any more division. We don't need any more fear. We don't need any more hatred. We don't need any more violence. We need to come together as Texans, as human beings, as Americans before we're Republicans or Democrats or anything else. And we need to do the right thing for and by the people of Texas. Your action, our victory, will purchase a far better future for our fellow Texans, especially our children, who only get a vote or a voice through the actions that we take. Their eyes are upon us right now, and you know damn well they will be on us in the future, where it is their judgment that we will face, and it is their judgment as the father of 3 kids, a 15, a 14, and 11-year-old, that I fear more than anything else. They know that it's been 16 weeks and a day since 19 children, not unlike them, and their 2 teachers, not unlike the teachers before them in their own classrooms, were taken from us, defenseless against a man who is able to legally purchase not 1, but 2 AR-15s and hundreds of rounds of ammunition for that weapon of war that was originally designed and engineered and sold to the United States military to be able to take down an enemy soldier at 500 yards and to penetrate that soldier's steel helmet and to kill him dead. Those kids defenseless against that weapon of war, but also defenseless against a governor who refuses to lift a finger to prevent tragedies like that from happening in our own communities. 16 weeks and a day, and your kids and my kids in these classrooms across Texas, no better protected than they were in the last day of school in Uvalde on May 24th for those children. Here's what we purchase with our victory. We bring the people of this state together through the common ground and the common sense that should be able to define us. We say, listen, to those teachers and administrators and children and parents, we understand that we can do a far better job of protecting your schools. You tell us what you need, we will partner with you and we will be there. To those who are concerned about mental health care issues in the state of Texas and whether there might be a connection to gun violence, listen, I don't know if there's necessarily a connection in that case or any other case, but just in case there is, let us acknowledge that today we are 51st in the nation, behind every other state in the District of Columbia in the ability to see a mental health care provider. In fact, our largest provider of mental health care services in the state of Texas today is the county jail system. There are those at meetings just like these who rise up and tell me that their brother, their mother, their child will get arrested on purpose because their untreated schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, clinical depression, because they don't have access to Medicaid or private insurance, has driven them to go to the one place where they're guaranteed any kind of care, however insufficient or immoral it might be in this state. And it's not for a lack of resources. We're the 9th largest economy on the planet. A $2 trillion gross domestic product, a $250 billion biannual budget. Now, we have the resources to do the right thing. We've just lacked the political will so far. So let's make sure that at a minimum we expand Medicaid in this state by bringing in $10 billion a year to connect more people to more care, open up more of these closed rural hospitals and clinics, and prioritize access to behavioral and mental health care for our fellow Texans. But if we do all of that and fail to heed the leadership of Moms Demand Action, or those students who marched for all of our lives, or those young people at the high school in Houston, Texas yesterday, who went through one of the worst things I can imagine for any young person, who were told there was an active shooter on their campus, and what are they supposed to do? Hide under their desks, go into the closet, try to climb out the windows? They know that in Uvalde 16 weeks and 1 day ago, there were 91 state troopers on the other side of an unlocked door for more than 70 minutes. They know that you can fortify those schools, you can invest in mental health care, but unless you're willing to do the right thing about the fact that an 18-year-old can legally walk into a gun store and buy those weapons of war, that we don't have universal background checks, that law enforcement has no ability to intervene before it is too late when someone is threatening to take the lives of those children in those schools or in our workplaces or our movie theaters or in our Walmarts for that matter, then it's no longer on Greg Abbott. It becomes every single one of us who's culpable in the outcome. That's why I say, not only must we win, but we must take action on that common ground that I described. I've listened to people across the state of Texas, the biggest cities, the most remote rural communities, gun owners and non-gun owners alike. As governor, here's where I think the common ground and the action is. At a minimum, let us raise the age for purchase of an AR-15 from 18 to 21 years old. Some will say, we anticipate the argument, they'll say, listen, Beto, criminals don't follow the law. And we concede that. We say, that's right, that's what makes them criminals in the first place. But this young man in Uvalde did not try to get the AR-15 when he was 16 or 17. The law said that he had to be 18. He patiently waited for his 18th birthday. This has been documented. You couple raising the age, which would have purchased us 3 more years in Uvalde for some intervention in that young man's life to stop that needless slaughter that we saw on the 24th of May. You couple that with a red flag law that says, look, if you already have that gun and you're threatening to use it against yourself or somebody else, there has to be some way for law enforcement to intervene. That shooter in Uvalde was sending off such strong signals that his friends called him the school shooter, before he ever walked into Robb Elementary and shot a single child or teacher. You know, that shooter that I described who came to El Paso from Allen, Texas, when his AK-47 came in that he'd ordered, his mom called the Allen Police Department and said, Mr. Officer, I have no idea what my son wants with this AK-47. She may also have signaled other signs of distress in his life, but because we don't have a red flag law, they said, I'm sorry, good luck, you're on your own. He then travels to El Paso, Texas, and takes the lives of 23 of our fellow Texans. Or how about a universal background check? Some may say, look, that's why I just bought a firearm yesterday. I go through a background check at the gun store. Well, you're right. But because we don't have a universal background check, you can buy from a private seller, no questions asked. That's exactly what happened in Midland and Odessa a month after the El Paso shooting in 2019. Guy walks into a gun store, tries to buy an AR-15. They won't sell it to him because he can't pass the background check. Good, it works. But then he goes and buys from a private seller the exact same firearm, turns around and uses it against people in that community, taking 8 lives along with his own. Now we can see that these kind of common sense proposals that have bipartisan Republican and Democratic support won't solve every instance of gun violence. But we must also acknowledge that they would have prevented the massacres that I just described today and allowed us to continue to defend the Second Amendment while better protecting the lives of our fellow Texans. We can get that much done. Are you with me on this? And thinking about those teachers yesterday in Houston, Texas, those teachers at a similar scare just outside of Austin, Texas, those teachers that are teaching our 3 kids in the 10th, 9th, and 6th grades in El Paso, Texas, what about the fact that they are sacrificing, they are giving the best years of their lives to our children and to the future of this state, and we now ask them to contemplate giving their very life to stand between that child that they've already served so nobly and that gunman who might very well enter that classroom someday. So many educators have come to me and said, Beto, I've got a plan. I'm a chemistry teacher. We have these big lab tables in my classroom. I think I can hide behind those. They're probably going to stop a bullet. But that teacher will then say, but what about the social studies or English or algebra teacher down the hall? I've talked to parents who tell me that their 9-year-olds have a plan of escape, and they've told their kid, listen, I don't care what that teacher tells you, you're not hiding under a desk, you're not going into the closet, you're going to find whichever one of those windows opens up in that classroom, and you're going to get the hell out of there, and you're going to keep running until you see my face at our front door. What in the hell are we doing to one another right now? Can you imagine what our kids are thinking today? They think that we've accepted this as our status quo, as our future, as our fate, as their fortune in life. And those teachers who we've already asked so much of, let me tell you what they're also up against right now. Half of them in the state of Texas are working a 2nd or 3rd job because we underpay them on average by $7,500 a year against the national average. Those teachers, after 2 years of pandemic and learning loss, and those children before them who've lost their grandparents, in some cases their folks have lost their jobs, they may have lost their homes and they're bouncing from one couch to another. They need the full attention, the caring, not just the academic excellence that teacher can afford, but the full social and emotional package that teacher brings to that classroom each and every single day. That's why, as governor, I'm going to heed your call to make sure that we allow you to fully connect with those kids by removing the STAR test as an obstacle to what you do in the classroom day in and day out. High stakes, high pressure, standardized test is a windfall for the test makers, but it does nothing to help us measure the potential inside that child or the effort expended on that kid's behalf by those educators who make public education possible. And to make sure that we get this done, I'm going to name a classroom teacher as our next TEA commissioner to make sure that we have someone who has some real experience in the profession that matters more than almost any other in the state of Texas. You know, you're going to be hearing a lot from Greg Abbott that is intended to scare you. You know, if you have a record like his, inflation going through the roof on his watch, disaster after disaster, whether it is Uvalde, whether it is a maternal mortality rate that rivals almost any other developed country and is 3 times as deadly for black women, whether it's child protective services that I just described, or teachers leaving the profession by the thousands, I understand, although nothing justifies, the fact that his only tactic left is to try to scare you, to scare all of us about me in this campaign and the people who comprise it, the very folks in this room. One of the things that he's going to talk about is law enforcement and crime. Try to scare you about what will happen if you change horses and choose me or a Democrat or anyone other than Greg Abbott. You deserve to be armed with the facts. Here they are. Over the last 8 years on his watch, homicides in Texas are up 50%. On his watch over the last 8 years, the governor, who when asked by a member of the press why there was no exception for rape victims in his total ban on abortion that begins at conception, responded he was going to eliminate rape in the state of Texas. You deserve to know more rapes have been committed in this state than any other in the union. Our ability to bring a perpetrator to justice has declined by half since this guy was first elected in 2014. And today there are 3,000 untested rape kits at the Department of Public Safety headquarters in Austin, Texas, collecting dust right now. Violent crime is on the rise, and it happened under Greg Abbott. And I'll tell you why. Because for all of his talk about supporting law enforcement and funding them, he's done exactly the opposite. Gun violence today is a leading cause of death for teenagers and children in the state of Texas, and more cops have been gunned down in this state than in any other. What did he do about it? He ignored police officers and sheriff's deputies and signed into law something known as permitless carry. We used to have something called license to carry in the state of Texas. Moms Demand understand this program very well. It just said, look, if you want to carry a gun in public, we're okay with that as long as you go through a background check, you receive some firearms training so we know that you're proficient in this weapon before you begin to use it, and we can vet you to make sure you're not a danger to yourself or to anybody else. Over the last 5 years, law enforcement 38,000 times stopped one of our fellow Texans from carrying a gun in public. In other words, did not issue them that license because they posed too much of a threat to the rest of us. This was the message from law enforcement to Greg Abbott. Turned his back on them, completely ignored them, signed it into law anyhow because he cares more about the NRA and his polling prospects in the Republican presidential primary in 2024 than he does about the lives of our kids or those who put their lives on the line to defend us each and every day. And listen, when he tries to scare you about defund the police, know this. I fully support funding law enforcement, making sure that they have the training necessary and also the accountability that breeds the kind of trust that we need to protect everyone in every single community, regardless of the differences between us. But when you see him or hear him try to scare us about defunding the police, know this. 7 years ago, when Greg Abbott was governor of the state of Texas, the Uvalde Police Department said, we need some funding. Our radios don't work. In fact, we might be inside of a building and they'll no longer operate. We won't be able to get messages from 911 dispatch or from officers who are outside of the building. 6 years ago, the same request. 5 years ago, the same request. 4, 3, 2, 1. May 24th, 2022. Those Uvalde police officers were inside of Robb Elementary. Those radios never arrived because the funding from Greg Abbott never came through and they didn't work. I want you to understand that the number one priority that we have for one another, that I will have as your governor, is to keep you safe and secure. The number one failure on Greg Abbott's watch is the fact that he's been unable to do that. For those kids in Uvalde, for those folks in that Walmart in El Paso, Texas, for the victims of violent crime, homicide, and rape across the state of Texas, Greg Abbott has failed us. We must defeat him, and we must come through for one another. You all with me on this? Y por el último, last one. I want to acknowledge that the attacks from our governor against our fellow Texans do not fall to us all equally. If you're black, if you're brown, if you're young, if you're a Texan living with a disability in this state, there is a target on your back when it comes to the right to vote. I mentioned earlier, not only is this the toughest state in the nation in which to register or cast a ballot, but we've had 750 polling place closures, twice the number of the next closest state. Most of those closures in the fastest growing black and brown neighborhoods. On election day, I predict this because I've seen it every other election day over the last few election cycles. We will see images beamed from outside of Texas Southern University. Voters in lines 6 hours deep trying to cast a ballot. Now, is it just that people who live near TSU are that excited to vote? Or is it because so many polling place closures have occurred in that predominantly African American neighborhood? And the governor knows cynically full well that while some will endure that indignity for those 6 hours on election day, there are too many others, because of the jobs that they're working, the parents they're taking care of, the kids that they're raising, or just the fact that I don't blame them. They say, the hell with this. I'm not waiting 6 hours in my own democracy in order to cast a ballot. It is intended to depress the turnout and the political power of some, to elevate the turnout and political power of others. Combined with the racial gerrymander of this state, you are drawn in or drawn out based on your ethnicity or your race from your ability to choose your next representative or governor in this state. You understand the attack that we are up against. I just want you to know that I hear you, I see you, and I'm going to fight for you. When we win, after we've contacted those voters who've been the targets of suppression and intimidation, not only will we restore online voter registration and have automatic and same-day voter registration, we are also going to replace Confederate Heroes Day as a state holiday with Election Day as a state holiday, so that you can take the day off and actually cast your ballot. To the women and girls who are among us right now, to members of the LGBTQ community as well. Not only do we have a total abortion ban, no exception for rape or incest, at the epicenter of a maternal mortality crisis. Now, thanks to Justice Clarence Thomas, we know what's coming down the pike next. An attack on same-sex intimacy, which means reviving the sodomy laws in the state of Texas. An attack on marriage equality, a reminder that no victory is ever final, the fight will never be over, and even the right to contraception in the United States of America, and that fight to restrict it and to end those protections will start right here in Texas if Greg Abbott is governor. I want you to know that I have been listening to you. I understand the attacks that you're under. I know the indignity that you are forced to live with right now in your own state, where you live by the law, follow the rules, pay your taxes, are just trying to get ahead and do better for yourself and do better for every single one of us. That's why I commit to you today. We will never stop fighting for every woman to make her own decisions about her own body, her own future, and her own health care. We will fight for everyone to be just who they are, to love the person that they want to be with, to marry the Texan of their choice. And lastly, and then I'm going to turn the microphone over to you. There's one group that is in particular in the crosshairs of this governor at this moment. I touched on it briefly earlier. And that is those who come to this country from some other place on the planet. Now, all of us did at one time or another. Some of us in this room have ancestors who came here 10 or 15,000 years ago, indigenous to this land. Others were brought here in bondage against their will and literally forced to build the wealth and the success that now all of us enjoy, but whose very descendants struggle to enjoy it at the same rate as others. There were those who, like my forefathers, left Ireland in the 19th century, knowing full well that they would die in the midst of that famine if they didn't find another country to take them in. It happened to be this one, and this state is where they ultimately found a place to call home. Those who are coming here today from Haiti, from El Salvador, from Honduras, from Guatemala, from Ukraine, from so many other countries around the world are part of this same tradition that has made us great to begin with, that is the answer to why we are so successful, so strong, and yes, I would argue, so safe. But today, more than 30 years since we last had a comprehensive rewrite of our immigration laws, Ronald Reagan was the president the last time that this happened, we failed to find a safe, legal, orderly path for those who want to come here to work, who want to come here to join family, or who want to come here to seek asylum, because just like the O'Rourke's more than 100 years ago, to go back to their home country will mean certain death for them and their kids. As the governor seeks to vilify them, I want us to use our uniquely human capacity to empathize with them. I want you to think for just a moment about those 53 human beings they found dead in the back of that trailer in San Antonio, Texas this year. And I want you to think about what it would take for you to climb in the back of that trailer, just like those people did. And I want you to think about what it would require from you to reach down once you're in the trailer and grab hold of the hand of your 11-year-old son or daughter and bring them up with you. You don't do this for kicks. You don't do it to steal anybody's job or take their place in society. You probably only do this if there's no other option but to do this today. We have lost hundreds of human lives at the United States-Mexico border. People desperate to come here and yes, to do better for themselves, but to do better for all of us. I think we can all agree that the stunts under Greg Abbott, whether it's busing migrants to Chicago, New York, or DC, building 1.5 miles total of border wall, or involuntarily activating 10,000 members of the Guard, have done nothing to reduce legitimate concerns that we have about fentanyl, for example, being trafficked into our communities, or human beings being smuggled in the 21st century. So this is what I propose, again, after having listened to you, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, Texans. Let us make sure that as the defining immigrant state, as the defining border state, we use what we know better than any other place in America to finally solve the problems and the challenges and really the opportunities that we have. If you want to come here to work, we want you to follow the law, but we want to make sure that our laws reflect our values, our needs, and the reality here on the ground. A safe, legal path for you to be able to come here and connect with an employer. If you want to join family and you're in Mexico and the wait time is 20 years to do this the right way, it's about 20 years from India, it's about 20 years from the Philippines today. I don't condone this, and it doesn't justify it, but I understand why you might not want to wait 20 years and you cross in between ports of entry. Let's make sure there's a safe, legal, orderly path for you to come here and connect with family. And for those seeking asylum and refuge in a country comprised of asylum seekers and refugees, right now your wait time to have your asylum request adjudicated is 6 years. And we're asking you to live in squalor with your kids in refugee camps in Ciudad Juarez, in Tijuana, on the southern side of the border while we adjudicate that here on this side. Doesn't condone or justify people who nonetheless come through those ports of entry or cross in between, but understand why they're doing that today. The solution isn't going to be a wall. The solution isn't going to be more militarization, more threats, more demagoguery from the current governor. The solution is a safe, legal, orderly path. Instead of 6 years, how about we adjudicate that claim in 6 weeks? And if you pass, welcome to America. And if you don't, you must return to your country of origin, because we are a nation of laws, and that's what sets us apart from so much of the rest of the world. But hear me here. Texas has a chance to make sure that those laws in this nation of laws actually reflect who we are at our best. Are you all ready to lead on an issue that has needed solutions for decades, that hasn't had them? This is our chance, and we must come through. Thank you for coming out here today. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for signing up to knock on doors and win this election. We are very grateful, Conroe. Le agradezco. Gracias. And Cynthia Conroe, who's right here to my right, has a microphone. If you have a question, a comment, a suggestion, an idea, a solution, this is why we showed up. We want to listen to and learn from those whom we want to serve. Best way to do that is to hear it from you directly. So if you'll get Cynthia's attention, she'll bring the microphone over to you. We'll get as many people into the conversation as we can.
I want you to clarify whenever you're on TV or whatever that you are not against the Second Amendment. When I speak to people that are against you, they say you're going to take away all the guns. Yeah, but they're okay with taking away assault rifles. And I would tell them, no, he is not going to take away all the guns. So I just, whenever you're in front of a TV camera, make sure that people understand you're not against the Second Amendment. You are for the Second Amendment. And you're not going to take away everybody's guns. And, someone needs to be 21 before they can buy one. And, and armor-piercing bullets. The only thing that those are cop killers. But that's what I'm hearing for people. That you get elected, everything, their shotgun, their deer rifle, it's all going to disappear.
Thanks for the question. This is on a lot of people's minds right now, so I'm so glad that you raised this. I want you to know this and be able to share this with those who share these concerns with you. One, like many of you here, born and raised in Texas, raised in a household with firearms. My uncle Raymond Clark was the jail captain at the El Paso County Jail. He's a sheriff's deputy, and he also won the El Paso County Sheriff's Department's Marksman's Award. So he insisted upon being the one to teach me and my sisters, Erin and Charlotte, how to shoot a gun, but also the responsibility that comes with owning that gun. How you use it, where you point it, where you don't point it, right? These are the conversations, by the way, that you all have had with your children, that I've had with our 3 kids, because we also own guns. We've also taught them how to shoot, and we've also instructed them in the responsibility and accountability that comes with it. That's who we are as Texans. That's our long, proud tradition of responsible gun ownership. That's where we want to be right now. But to your point, when an 18-year-old can walk into a gun store and buy 2 AR-15s, hundreds of rounds of ammunition, I don't think that's responsible. When you have a governor who signs away the license to carry program for one known as permitless carry against the guidance and the pleading of law enforcement, because they don't want to go up against somebody who's not been vetted, who hasn't had a background check, who has an AR-15 and is pointing that weapon at them right now, that's not in keeping with our long, proud tradition of responsible gun ownership. The 3 big ideas that I put forward: raising the minimum age of purchase for an AR or an AK to 21, a red flag law, a universal background check. Most of us, the great majority of us, Republicans, Democrats, gun owners, non-gun owners alike, can get behind that. We can even add to that ending the impunity and the legal immunity that gun manufacturers enjoy when they sell these kind of weapons to 18-year-olds right now and bear none of the consequences and face none of the justice for doing that. Most of us can get on board. That restores this long, proud tradition that we are talking about right now. So look, on this issue as on any other, no 2 people will agree all the time. But as I've listened to my fellow Texans, I have found this much agreement, at least on these 3 issues. We can make progress. And when I think about those families in Uvalde, speaking of our conscience and accountability, they've asked that we not forget the names of their children. They've asked that no other family have to endure the suffering that they're going through, and frankly, that they will go through for the rest of their lives. And they've asked for action. We cannot allow the perfect to become the enemy of the good. We must make progress. And on these 3 ideas that I've raised with you today, I am confident we can find a majority of Republicans and Democrats in the state legislature to get the job done, to defend the Second Amendment while better protecting the lives of our fellow Texans, most importantly, our children. Thank you for the question.
Hi, my name is Sherry Walker, and I'm a Texan. And I am extremely honored to be in this room with you, Mr. Beto. My question is, so in the 1970s, there were a group of young men in Oakland, California, and they were the Black Panther Party. Whether you agree with their, anyone agrees with most of what they stood for, one thing that they did stand for was making sure that Black children in any inner city neighborhoods were able to have breakfast in the morning. And we know that when a child is fully nourished and they go to school, they are able to concentrate because their brain is fed. So that, they're able to get their lessons and focus on not being hungry. And in my community, there are such things called food deserts, to where we do not always have proper access to food of nourishment, fresh vegetables, fresh fruits, quality meats, quality milks. Sometimes you can walk into the store and you'll see a lemon, an apple, or orange, and it is way past time to be thrown away. And what I wanted to ask you, Mr. O'Rourke, is what is your plan for those food deserts? How do we ensure that each child in Texas, no matter what their economic or social background is, has access to quality nourishment? And how do we make sure that moms, single moms, moms that are married, dads that are single, dads and dads, moms and moms, how do we make sure that they have access and ability to get those nutritious things to their children?
Thank you for this great question. It's excellent, and it touches upon so many things that are so important to so many of our fellow Texans right now. I remember just going back a little bit in time, it was 2018, and I was traveling through Kashmir Gardens with the neighborhood president there. And as you all know, Hurricane Harvey just walloped this region, hit Kashmir Gardens particularly hard. But the neighborhood leader there said, Beto, before Hurricane Harvey, a storm had already hit this community. And as we were traveling, and he was kind of giving me a dashboard tour in his car of the neighborhood, he said, tell me the last time, as we've been driving over these last 20 minutes, that you saw a supermarket, or you saw a place where someone could get a healthy meal, or produce, or fruit, or just anything that is healthy, packed with vitamins. And now count for me the number of check cashing places, the number of liquor stores, the number of convenience stores where you can get processed foods high in sugar, high in all the kind of junk that you need, that if you just are looking for a superficial fix, it's good. But if you want the kind of quality calories to burn while you're doing that homework that your teacher assigned, you're going to be out of luck. That describes so much of Texas today. It's East Waco, which I learned when I was in that part of the community, asked the exact same question by a leader there. We were talking about healthcare earlier and how we're dead last in the nation in those who are insured. It means more Texans than people of any other state can't fill a prescription, can't see a doctor, can't take their child to a behavioral health specialist. Well, that's part of healthcare, but another, maybe even more fundamental part of healthcare is what we put inside of our bodies. And if you cannot easily get those kinds of calories that are healthy, that are going to allow you to live to your fullest potential, fulfill your promise, we are doing you and all of us a deep disservice. Because not only do we want you to do better in your life, we realize that when you do better, you're going to do better for all of us. When you're fully able to reveal your genius, it accrues to the benefit of the people of Texas. So, in addition to making sure that we get that $10 billion back of our federal income taxes that we paid up to Washington, D.C. in the form of Medicaid expansion, I also want to partner with and invest in underserved communities so that they are no longer food deserts, so that we fund the oases that we need to make sure that we connect children especially, but their entire family, with the nutrition that is going to allow them and all of us to do better. But I want to touch on just a couple of other things that are related to this. Think about the single dad, or the single mom for that matter, or even if they are married, who are working a $7.25 an hour job in Texas today. That has been the minimum wage for the last 13 years. We all know how much costs have increased just in this past year. Imagine the last 13 years, and maybe no one here is working a $7.25 an hour job. I tell you what, traveled this entire state. I am meeting the people who are working these jobs, and they're not working one of them. They're working two of them. They are working three of them. Very often the toughest jobs. Taking care of our aging parents or our young kids who themselves are unable to afford health care for their parents or child care for their kids right now. Imagine trying to stretch that $7.25 an hour far enough to be able to get those healthy calories that are too expensive and too far out of reach for them. So let's imagine this. What if we raise the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour so people work just one job instead of two or three and can actually afford these healthy calories that we need to get into our system? And then make these other investments. They're going to help the whole family, especially children. All-day universal pre-K, which frees mom and dad up to be able to work, finish their education, do better over the course of their lives. And lastly, and I know I'm stretching the answer to your question a little bit, but it's all related in my mind at least. The housing crisis that we find in our communities, the number of people in a $2 trillion economy who are sleeping on the sides of roads, under bridges, in parks today, and these are families with kids. And you all know that, we all know that if we'll just open our eyes to who we see there on the streets, or for those who are educators or married to or know these educators, these are the children they're teaching day in and day out, who show up in the same dirty pair of jeans, the same dirty t-shirt, the same dirty pair of chones underneath Monday through Friday. And very often it is that educator out of her own pocket who's paying for a new set of clothes so that child can hold his head high with pride. Very often paying for that third meal of the day if they're on free and reduced breakfast and lunch. They know that they need some healthy calories to burn at night when they're doing that homework. So let's make sure that across all of these different opportunities, we're investing in our fellow Texans. It will produce a return far and away greater than the initial cost in order to do that. Thank you for asking the question.
To your left, and over here.
Got it.
All right, we have time for three more.
Hi, my name is Emily Winslow, and I'm a former educator. As I'm sure you're aware, schools in this area are run by conservative boards and led by conservative leaders, but not all of our students are. I was recently forced to resign, but I taught emergent bilingual students who were brand new to the country, and I saw the way rhetoric trickled down into the classroom. I see the increased banning of books in which students see themselves. How do we make sure all students are served by the public school system, regardless of whether they live in a blue or red county? Sorry.
Thanks for the question. Thanks for your public service. I mentioned that Greg Abbott is trying to master the art of fear, of hatred, of distraction. We do have legitimate concerns in our Texas classrooms, so I'll give you one. Prior to the pandemic, so you know it is worse today, 7 out of 10 fourth graders in the average Texas classroom could not read at grade level. That has nothing to do with the kid or their extraordinary teachers or their parents. I mentioned all-day pre-K, which we do not have today. Those of you in education know that we don't fix that problem in the 4th grade. We won't catch up to it in the 5th grade. We won't prevent it in the 3rd grade. It's when that child is 3 or 4 or 5-year-old, making that investment in them then allows them to succeed by the time they're in 4th grade. When teachers are this underpaid or under this level of attack, no wonder that they're leaving the profession literally by the thousands today. My 11-year-old who just finished 5th grade in June did not have a permanent classroom teacher the entire year. It was one sub after another, and God bless the subs, but the sub is not the same as a permanent, consistent, stable classroom teacher who's there not just to perform for those kids academically, that's super important, but is also the one who on a day in, day out basis will be able to know if something's not right with that child. If maybe they're suffering abuse or malnutrition or there's some other social or emotional problem that they're undergoing right now, we cannot put a number or a value on that. It's extraordinary what these teachers do. And then today, because of this distraction, fear, and hatred, the governor, instead of fixing that, wants you to be afraid of critical race theory. I've never heard the phrase before last year. I had no idea that second graders and third graders were being taught a law school level graduate course in Texas schools right now. So why is this important? The fact that the governor now is dictating, though he's never been a classroom educator, he's dictating to those classroom educators, the people who've taken tens of thousands of dollars in debt are working 2 and 3 jobs for the privilege of teaching our kids. He's going to tell them they cannot teach our complete full history or share the stories of all Texans. Why is this important? And let me give it to you this way. You know, I talked about so many of the attacks that we are weathering and enduring right now. And one of those is this attack on the right to vote. Part of the reason that I think it's so important that we learn our history is that it's important to know that not only can we overcome this attack right now, but we've overcome it before against much longer odds. And let me explain. This is the kind of lesson that a Texas teacher today might be confused about whether he or she is able to teach. 100 years ago, it was actually 99 years ago, 1923, the Texas legislature outlawed voting by black Texans. Now, to be clear, I'm not using a euphemism here. It wasn't how many jelly beans are in the jar, or pay this poll tax, or take this literacy test, or recite this part of the Texas state constitution. Literally in black and white, through state statute, it said, if you're African American, you live in Texas, you will not be voting in our elections anymore. In El Paso, Texas, that following year, 1924, an election year, just like this one, a black physician named Lawrence Nixon, Dr. Lawrence Nixon, who had started the first NAACP chapter in the state of Texas in my hometown in 1914, who never missed an election, was as conscientious and engaged and civically participating as a human could be. Worked with the mayor and the city council to get the resources in a bond election, for example, to build a swimming pool for black children. Because in Texas in that time, if you were black and you were a child, you couldn't swim in the same public pools that white kids did, even though you paid your taxes to fund those pools. Always working on solutions, always voting, always holding those in positions of public trust and power accountable. Now, this guy knows full well that he's now prevented legally from voting. Nonetheless, in 1924, he pays his poll tax, which is a prerequisite for voting in any election, takes his poll tax receipt to fire station number 5, which is his normal polling place on Texas Avenue. It's still there in El Paso, Texas. Waits in line, gets to the front of the line. The election judges, because this guy's never missed an election, recognize him. And they say, Dr. Nixon, you know we can't let you vote. And Nixon responds, I know you can't, but I've got to try. And though rejected on that day, he takes this case to the federal bench in the Western District of Texas, loses the decision before that judge, appeals it all the way up to the United States Supreme Court, and over the course of the next 20 years, 20 years, think about waiting 20 years, the persistence, the patience, the dedication, the indignity under which he labored. I'm sure friends and family were saying, hey buddy, give it up. It's never going to work. You're never going to win. He wins not 1, but 2 signal United States Supreme Court victories. And by 1944, thanks in part actually to somebody born not too far from here in the 5th Ward of Houston, Texas, Lonnie Smith, in an historic decision called Smith versus Allwright, they win integration in Texas elections and set the ground for the next 20 years so that the first Texas president, Lyndon Baines Johnson, by 1965, will sign into law the Voting Rights Act, which creates the first true multiracial democracy in the history of the United States of America. All of that came from us, the people of Texas. But that story today might very well be forbidden in our very Texas classrooms. Our kids deserve to know that though we are under historic attacks in this democracy, we are going to overcome because we've done it before and we will again. That's why I support teaching history in Texas classrooms. Thanks for the question. Appreciate it.
Hi, my name is Diane
Megan Reynolds, and I work with the homeless. We have a nonprofit. We do the street work, the dirty work. We bring them the food, the hygiene packs, the clothes, the shoes. Over 30% of them have an income, and they can't afford a place to live. The mental health down there, or all over the area, is horrible. One location we serve, we started with, there were 60 people living down there. We serve over 300 in one location now. Something has got to be done to help these people. We hold their hands, we take them to the services, but the red tape and the length it takes to get somebody help and off the street is absolutely disgusting. So what can you do to help our veterans who are out there also? Amen. Thank you very much. Up to 40% of homeless men are veterans, and that is horrible. So what can you do for that? And I would like to invite you to our next outreach if you want to come. Thank you.
Yes. Invitation accepted. We will join you. Thank you for being here. In elevating the cause and the cases of Texans who don't have the resources to contribute to those in office, aren't part of any kind of political action committee, the way that access and outcomes are typically purchased in this state, and yet are just as important as any other human being who resides in Texas today and deserve to have a champion. And that is all of us who are fighting for them to be able to do better. I made the case earlier, when they do better, we all do better as well, right? Here's some things I've learned by accepting invitations such as yours. Listening to a woman who was experiencing homelessness nearby in Houston, and I asked her, well, can you get city or county or state supported services? She told me, she might have been right, she might have been wrong, you can tell me. But she said, I have to be experiencing homelessness for a year before I qualify for some of these services. So I'm just waiting my time. How did she become homeless? Her husband was beating her almost to the point of death, got a court order to keep him away from her. When he persisted, he got locked up, but so was the only source of income for that home. She could no longer meet the note on that mortgage or feed herself or take care of herself. She was in a tent under a bridge in Houston, Texas, biding her time until she qualified for these resources in a state that boasts a $2 trillion gross domestic product. In Greens Point, which I learned from Pastor Decker is sometimes called Guns Point. I met a young man named Mike who was also experiencing homelessness. And stupidly, naively, and maybe just a lack of experience on my part, I asked Mike why he didn't get a job. And to the point that you just made, he had some minor source of income, but he asked me with extraordinary generosity and grace, hey Beto, how do you think I get that job when I don't have an address to put down on the employment application form? When I'm showing up in these same stinky, dirty clothes, when I cannot take a shower, when I have no dignity with which to hold myself when I'm before that person who I'm asking this opportunity from. Mike explained to me so patiently, listen, it begins with a roof over my head, a home that I can go home to. That's my starting base. You give me that much, give me that opportunity, and I promise you, I can get the job, I can get the care, I can get myself back up on my feet today. And then for these veterans, can you believe this country, which spares no expense to send these women and men off to fight our wars, some of which now have lasted more than 20 years and are still going, and yet skimps on taking care of those who come back after having served us. The Vietnam era veterans in this room know full well that our country waited 4 decades, 40 years, to treat your exposure to Agent Orange as a presumptive condition for those cancers that consumed so many of those with whom you went off to serve this country with 1960s, 1970s, more than 50 years ago. And today there are veterans who are experiencing homelessness in this great state. I say this, let us spare no expense. Let us bear every burden necessary to make sure that no veteran experiences homelessness in this great state after having put their lives on the line for this country. If we will invest in these solutions, using the resources in the state of Texas, more than $40 billion in surplus today, Imagine the housing that we could build. Couple that with the tax credit financing program or local lending institutions so that we can build not only homes, but equity for people who can pass down that wealth to the generations that follow them. There is no stopping this state in what we will be able to do. If we do all of that and some of the other things that we talked about, raising the minimum wage, expanding access to healthcare, making sure that those in mental health care crises end up not in the county jail, but in front of a psychiatrist or psychologist or therapist or social worker, we are going to be such a stronger, such a successful state as a result. Thank you for raising this question. Appreciate it.
To your right, and this is going to be our last question.
That's right. Governor, did I say that?
That sounds so good.
We are praying and working on the grounds. I live in a Republican stronghold. I have the only veto sign on my entire circle. But I'm telling you, what you do is not just know the issues and your connectivity. I want to strongly suggest that your next set of campaign advertisement be about character, about democracy, civility, responsibility, sincerity, and trustworthiness. I believe because we're knocking on doors, we're phone banking and all of that, and people aren't as aware of the issues, and some of them are chimed out, but everybody wants to know who's standing before them. I would love to see a great contrast between the war on truth and security for you to show your civility, your responsibility, that you are sincere and you are connected to Texans, and the line is clear. You are either choosing this or that. The issues will be taken care of based on the person leading. Thank you, Governor. We're praying for you.
I love that. Thank you so much. Wow. Thank you. Excellent. Folks, let me say this. The things that we can measure about this campaign, about this election, about our prospects are so positive. You saw in the last fundraising period that thanks to more than 500,000 unique individual contributions, the average of which was $36.30, the greatest number of which came from school teachers across the state of Texas, we outraised the sitting governor by nearly $3 million. Thanks to you and everyone who signed up, we now have just under 90,000 volunteers who are out there knocking on millions of doors across the state, the largest volunteer force that has ever been fielded in the state of Texas. And yesterday we got some good news for those of you who still follow or care about polls. The latest poll I saw has us down 2 points from the sitting governor of the state of Texas. But more important than that is everything that was just said right now. The fact that we're doing the right thing at the right moment in the right way. And look at it this way. I mentioned the despair that can tempt us, the darkness that has befallen Texas. But the way that we choose to meet this, with all of us literally personally here, the commitment to knock on doors, this reflects our character and our values and the great difference between this campaign and the one being run by the sitting governor. We fully understand that we are so lucky and fortunate to be alive at this moment, to be the generation that has the opportunity to fight for everything that makes us great in the first place. When the odds are this great, when the stakes are this high, when everything that we care about for ourselves and most importantly for our kids and grandkids is on the line, the fact that we have chosen to come together to fight with everything we've got, with all that we are worth, and to win this election and to come through for the people of Texas, that's what defines us going forward more than any cruelty, chaos, corruption, or incompetence of this current governor. We are better than that, and we will show the world when we win this on the night of November 8th. Thank you all for being part of this victory, for being here today, and for winning this one for Texas. Le agradezco. Gracias.
If y'all would like to stay and say hello or take a quick picture.